I'd like to call to order the Planning Commission meeting on the 13th of March. It's 6:01 p.m. We'll start with our commissioner reports. Does anybody present have anything they'd like to speak about? I'd like to welcome Pleasance to our group. It's going to be nice having another voice with a whole set of different experience in life to add to our commission. I look forward to working with you.
Thank you. Welcome. Looking forward to being here.
Other than that, I don't have anything. Staff reports.
Oh, definitely. Everyone did receive, I believe at this point, at least one version, if not two versions of an invitation to the March 25th open house for the US2 corridor project. So this is phase 2. This is the segment from Garfield to Craig Road, whereas the meeting February 5th was lost into Lundstrom. So again, this is a 30%. So this is a very preliminary design for US2. We're looking for feedback on where people feel it's unsafe crossing, where they're coming from, where they're going to, information on, what would be best for transit stops along the way. And then there's some concepts that'll be available for people to take a look at. So if you're a business owner, looking at that frontage road system again on the north side, preliminary draft of that will be available. 2 opportunities, one in the afternoon, one in the evening. The afternoon one is at the hub right there at US2 and Lawson from 11:30 to 1:30, and then at the Airway Heights Recreation Center from 4:30 to 6:30 that evening. We'll also be sending out a flyer shortly for another opportunity, which will be the following Monday on March 28th. And that's going to be over here at the Spokane County Library. And that one is a coalition of entities that are going to be talking about transportation. So Spokane Transit Authority is going to be talking about their next 30-year transportation plan for transit service. We'll have the US2 project, the 6th Avenue project, and the Craig Road project, and the 10th Avenue project there. The Spokane Tribe of Indians will also be there, the Kalispell Tribe of Indians, and Spokane Regional Transportation Council. So 4:30 to 6:30 over at the library. Come once, get it all. Maybe is the theme for that one. I should mention our event though on the 25th has a kids corner, and we have a coloring contest, which Mark has kindly volunteered, I believe, to be a judge. When we get those sketches back out of this, we'll have, I think, 4 age groups to judge on, and some prizes for the kiddos as part of that contest. And then information about the project will be in the back, so hopefully parent will read it, and the kid gets to draw on the front. And then we actually have engagement activities on US2 scheduled all the way through June, which will be the wrap up of the design of that project. So I mentioned that we have the open house for the phase 2 on the 25th. We get great news this week. We put in last year for federal appropriation for funding to help build one of those intersections being designed, which was Garfield and US2. And we found out this week that we got $1.87 million from the feds to help build that. That intersection at Garfield and US2 is failing at certain times of the day. The intersection light was actually aged out, and WashDOT had committed that they would participate in funding the project if we were able to get a roundabout for that location. And so I did speak with them, and they're going to get that in motion, and somewhere around $350,000 to $400,000 WashDOT's going to be throwing in for that project. So next year we will see a new roundabout, and that will really help with congestion. And
that intersection is just such a hot mess.
It is. And the pole that's there wasn't big enough to put in separate turn signal lights. And so it was this idea of we're going to spend a couple $100,000 to replace the light, or we can, go after the bigger fix for that intersection. So some great news on transportation moving forward, and some events that we're having moving forward as well.
How many grants this year does that make?
That we received money on. Second one, the one that we received earlier this year was on phase 1 of US2, and it was $850,000 from Washington State, from the Sandy Williams Reconnecting Communities. grant. So that's the second year in a row we've received that grant, and that's construction money. And that's intended as seed or match money
Nice.
for that project. And yeah, so far that's it this year.
I'd love to see one of these days just a line graph, just of what it's gone up since you guys have came into the city.
We can do that pretty easily.
I know Excel, so
Nice.
I know how to do it in Excel, so, yeah.
Yeah, it's been great. I'm trying to think if we got something at the end of last year. We did. So at the end of, well, actually, nope, I'm sorry, we got a third one this year. We got the Transportation Improvement Board money for 6th Avenue. That was about $780,000. That was awarded in January. And last fall, we got 2.42 million for 6th Avenue from the Freight Mobility Stability Improvement Board, FMSIB.
Nice. I just know we hear it more and more. So it's nice to hear these grants coming in.
It is, because that's the only way these projects happen is getting the grant funds. And so as we get closer, we'll be sharing more information, but the Craig Road, which is the Shared Use Path project, will kick off this June for construction. And we will also be starting in June on 6th Avenue for that construction as well. But again, we'll share that as we get a little bit closer.
How long do those last?
Hmm?
How long do both those last?
What?
How long does it take to have that project?
The Shared Use Path, which is a bicycle walking path on Craig Road, will be done in, I don't know, probably 80 or 90 working days. The 6th Avenue project is significantly larger because it's filling in the missing segment from Ketchum to Craig. Plus, we have to reconstruct. We did geotech all the way down 6th Avenue and found that we couldn't be saved. We have to rebuild it. So that one we believe will probably go all the way into the fall. Fingers crossed they'll finish it this year. If not, then the contractor will have to pick it up in the spring and finish the project because it's reconstructing the whole road.
Well, I know this much, you guys do tremendous work, and the amount that has been coming back into the city since you came here, it just, I feel like the citizens should,
Thank you. Thank you.
agree.
Well, and I think some of that information comes out, these public, the open houses and stuff, but it needs to be really touted because obviously people see these projects and the first thing that pops in their heads is, well, that's more of my tax dollars. I'd rather see X. And if they understood that how much of this costs are not being, they're not footing those costs themselves.
I agree. And if you have ideas of how we can help with that education, because I think people do think that it's coming out of tax dollars, it's not out of grants. And it's a difficult in a very short period of time to discuss, where your sales tax dollars and your property tax dollars go, which is really police and fire and running general governmental services, and how all these other arms of the city services, water and sewer and transportation, we're often working off of grants in order to
Well, and actually a total analog to do this comes to my mind. It's like the old days. They always used to put up signs on the freeways and stuff. But they used to say your tax dollars at work, right? For some stretch of road they're doing something to you. But it would seem like for instance, each end we put up a nice big sign that says scads and scads of grant dollars, went to this, and just go kind of old tech.
I think that's an awesome idea. Actually, I was just talking with Jerry. Richard's the head of the streets department because I have to have him make some signs anyway for the roads, and we could just reuse those 4 foot by 8 foot stands and do something like that. That's a great idea.
Make it simple.
I love the idea. I think that's great. So just brief update. Great idea.
That'll credit the grant. Give credit to whomever's giving us the money, credit to them.
True.
Show us who did.
True. Plus, we are receiving private investment from the CHAS, from the community health organizations investing in the road in Sixth
Sure.
Avenue too.
There's no need to add the numbers in there, but you can definitely say that it's covered, you know.
Yeah, definitely. It's a great idea. Zach.
Did you want to address Commissioner Dove?
Oh, okay. Apologize. Andre Dove is one of our commission members. He's been absent for 4 months.
Something like that. I could go, I had to go back and do a count.
Okay.
But
He had contacted us indicating that he had a commitment that was preventing him from participating on the second Wednesday. He had asked if there was a possibility of moving the meeting date and time. The commission discussed that at the last meeting and concluded that they wanted to keep the second Wednesday at 6 o'clock for the meeting time. That information was shared back to Andre Dove, and he asked what some options were. And so we provided options, which were, if the commitment is short term, he could certainly ask for an excused absence for a period of time, and it would be up to him to initiate that request. A similar activity occurred for Justin because he was going through sheriff's training for 90 days prior to his employment with the Lincoln County Sheriff's Office. Or the other option would be to resign, that there are other volunteer opportunities at the city that have different meeting commitments moving forward. I did speak with Andre last week by chance. We were both out in the community. He acknowledged that he'd received that communication about the options. He indicated he would reach out to Zach and I with a response, but we've not received one.
What is our rule say again? I can never remember them offhand.
Go ahead, Zach.
sorry, regarding
Attendance.
believe it's 3 or 4 unexcused absence in a 12-month period is the threshold for that, but let me double check the rule book real quick. So planning commission member shall forfeit his or her office by failing to attend 3 consecutive meetings of the commission without being excused by the commission. Any member having 3 unexcused absences in the 6-month period will be removed from the commission. Any member with 6 unexcused absences, excused or unexcused absences in the previous 12-month period will be removed from the commission.
And then we counted the first 2 as excused absences, right? There's that third one, the last meeting we discussed it.
Let me pull the minutes up, sorry.
Well, Zach's looking, Zach does a great job. All of your packets are posted online a week prior to the meeting. So if someone wanted to look and see what was on the agenda, and then the minutes are also posted online. So they're available publicly for anyone to go back and take a look at the minutes.
So he was excused on February 14th. Was excused on January 10th. He was excused on December 13th. So that's the last 3 meetings he was excused. And then we did not have a November meeting. And we didn't do a vote in October. So we're kind of getting back there a little bit. So my recommendation would be if you want, I mean, you can start on excusing him or
But it
now.
was, it was 6 over a 12-month period, regardless of excused or unexcused, correct?
that may
It was unexcused.
No, I'm saying, but the rules say that if you have 6 absences, excused or unexcused,
Yeah, Mark is correct. The way the language reads, planning commission members shall forfeit his or her office by failing to attend 3 consecutive meetings of the commission without being excused by the commission. Any member having 3 unexcused absences in a 6-month period will be removed from the commission. Any member with 6 excused or unexcused absences in the previous 12-month period will be removed from the commission. So I'd have to go back. That was so I can do the research on that and get back to you next month if you want
Yes,
and
please.
get a number on that officially, and we can address that in April.
Do we have to do that in the meeting in April, or if that's already been the threshold? Because I know we do have another candidate that's already been met by the council or the commission.
Mhm.
So it said that the language states will be removed.
It requires an action of the council.
So you would,
Because it's an advisory body appointed by the city council.
Okay,
yeah, so what I can do is I can do the research. If he qualifies for this, I can bring a request to remove Andre from the commission to city council. I did reach out to Melanie and let her know if there was another vacancy, I would communicate that with her. So she's stated she would be interested in any additional vacancy. So I don't know if I'll have enough time between now and the next meeting to do both of those things, just the way, because it takes a study session and a legislative session per action. So it would be 4 city council meetings because I can't do them concurrently. But I can get that ball rolling if of course, assuming that this threshold has been met.
okay, great.
Other than that, I do not have any report.
We'll call roll. Commissioner Hans, present. Commissioner Collins, present. Commissioner Jones, your first meeting, present. Commissioner Campbell, Vice Commissioner Campbell, present. Commissioner Mitchell, present. Commissioner Davis is excused. Commissioner Dove is unexcused.
Could we do a motion to excuse or unexcuse both of those?
Okay, does somebody want to make a motion on Commissioner Davis?
Move to approve or excuse Commissioner Davis for tonight's meeting. See that right?
Mhm.
Okay. Cold medicine, sorry.
I second that motion.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passed. Can I get a motion on Commissioner Dove?
Do we need a motion to unexcuse somebody, or is it just to excuse?
No, you
somebody?
only do a motion to excuse someone.
So then if you would like to not excuse him, then we can move forward.
Yeah, I would consider it not excused based on our meeting last month where we discussed this and gave options.
Okay.
Do you want to make that correction before you pass your minutes for February?
I'm confused.
You just said that you considered the last meeting for him being unexcused
No,
as
no,
well.
today's based on our conversation at
Oh,
the
okay.
last meeting.
Pardon me.
No, I'm sorry. I'm struggling with my voice today, so I apologize.
It's very quiet meeting so far.
You need to bring some more M&Ms, Zach.
And bring the M&Ms back. We can do that.
Nice. Oh, so we got our agenda up. Does anybody want to make a motion on our agenda tonight?
Before we do that, Heather, did you want to rearrange or propose to rearrange?
Do we have anyone from the public here today?
There is one person. I don't know who they are.
Just, we had spoken about this, Zach, and a little bit earlier, that since we have a training for this evening, if we have a member of the public here for the hearing, it may be better to move the public hearing up and the presentation below so that the citizen doesn't have to sit through a government training on open public meetings.
Okay,
You don't need to log off. I'm very sorry. We just don't want you to sit through a 20-minute video if you're here for the public hearing. So don't worry about it.
You could ask if they're here for the public hearing.
Are you here for the public hearing? Okay, So they're not here for the public hearing.
So you can keep your agenda in the order, or you can change it.
I would say let's just change it regardless. That way, if they do, because it's not gonna really change the meeting itself.
No.
So we just need somebody to make a motion on that, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, so that would be a motion to move item 8
No,
or 9, sorry, the Roman numerals, to item, either, what would that be, 11, or
it would be. it would
do
be
we
eight.
want to go under the workshop or above it?
I think the idea is to do the public hearing, the number 9 as the new number 8.
Okay,
So basically put number 8 down to 10, number 9 to 8, and number 10 to 9. Is that what I'm hearing?
No, we were proposing the public hearing be the first item, so that's item number 9.
Oh, I apologize, 9 to 8.
Mhm.
Okay. Do we want to do the training after the workshop or before the workshop? I don't know if this person wants to see that or not, because it feels like it would be based on one of those two.
I would suggest putting the training at the very end. Think of it as like the cool down from a workout.
Nice. Nice. Okay, so move 8 to 10.
No.
9 to,
and just for the record, Commissioner Davis has joined at 6:22.
oh, nice. Welcome, Justin.
Evening, guys.
Um, But so 8 to 10, and then 9 to 8, 10 to 9. Correct?
I think
Or am I
this is the
screwing
first
this up right now?
part. Move to approve the agenda with the change of the presentation moving after workshops.
That works.
Okay.
Nice.
We need a second on that.
There you go, second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All right.
Okay, there's a coffee pot back there.
It's working.
Yep, I can make a cup of coffee.
We're gonna need it.
Keep going.
All right, now, if we can get an approval of tonight's agenda based on the change that we just made.
Oh, just did it.
Was that the approval of the actual agenda or the
Yeah.
approval of the change?
The agenda with the change.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
We're
thank you.
official tonight.
Nice. All right, Zach, gonna pull up our minutes from last month.
Yeah.
I am very sorry I'm struggling right now.
All right, all good. So these are the minutes from Wednesday, February 14th, 2024.
Does it,
Move to approve the minutes from February 14th, 2024.
Second?
all those in favor?
Aye.
Guys have it. All right, we don't have public comment tonight.
We do, actually.
Oh,
So we do have one member of the public in the Zoom meeting, and they do have a question, which Heather, I think you would be the best person to probably fill in on this. The question is, so I was wanting to see if you were going to talk about the construction on Highway 2 for the new Yokes location. So I'm assuming that's the Lions Roundabout. Did you have a specific question regarding the construction? And I can unmute you if you'd like. I'm sorry, Nielsen, I believe, but you actually are unmuted. No, just update info. If there's any additional new information on the Lions Roundabout, I believe is the question. And then his mic isn't working, or her mic isn't.
Okay, so this question is referring to the roundabout being built by the Kalispel Tribe of Indians at Lyons Road in US 2. That design is going through review by the Washington State Department of Transportation. And the tribe is also excuse me, getting necessary easements from the Bureau of Indian Affairs and acquiring additional right of way that's necessary for the roundabout. So, excuse me, my understanding is the Kalispel tribe is hoping to initiate construction this year and have it completed by the end of the summer.
Is that sufficient, or were you looking for something more specific than that? Sorry, I'm going through the chat here. So the only option was roundabout, not light.
That was what the traffic impact analysis that the Kalispell tribe provided indicated was the necessary mitigation for the volume of vehicles that would be exiting would be a roundabout. Furthermore, roundabouts are WashDOT's preferred treatment for congestion management and for safety, which we've discussed here at the Planning Commission previously, because the roundabouts keeps vehicles moving, and the damage that's as a result of an impact with a roundabout is less between vehicles than at a signalized intersection. So basically, that's part of WashDOT's identification of appropriate mitigation for this type of roadway impact.
Didn't the cost also factor into that? Because it's extraordinary more cost on that light versus the roundabout, or am I misremembering a different conversation?
Yeah, just the opposite. Roundabouts are more expensive than lighted intersections.
Okay,
Will it be 2 lanes or 1 lane?
I believe that it will be 2 lanes in each direction going east-west as it is today. And then the exiting points north and south will be 1 lane each direction, because those are not highways, they're a collector north and south. Yes, the tribe needs to complete the Washington State Department of Transportation permitting process for the design, the engineering design, the right-of-way has to be acquired, and then they can initiate construction. And the goal, I understand from the Kalispells, is for the roundabout to be completed this year. You're welcome.
thank you, Nielsen.
All right.
All right, now let's move on to our public hearing.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
No, thank you.
Anyone else want a copy?
Okay. Let everybody get settled. Alrighty. We need to open it before I begin, right?
Yes.
Okay.
The hearing procedures for the chair. I'll be right back.
Sorry, let me get to your hearing procedures real quick. We are on the ball today.
We got through that last meeting really quick, so.
I
this is
told you.
why-
I told you. Okay. In the hearing. I don't know why I closed this. Okay. Six. Okay, so we currently don't have any members of the public here, but I'll go ahead and read it just to make it easy for you. All persons wishing to speak shall sign their name, address of residence, and indicate whether or not they wish to speak as a proponent, opponent, or from a neutral position on the form provided by the city. Any person who fails to sign in shall be not permitted to speak until all those who sign in have given their testimony. The chair may change the order of the speakers so the testimony is heard in the most logical groupings. The commission will take public testimony during a public hearing, the public comment period, and prior to action. Persons appearing before the commission shall limit their comments to 5 minutes. Where an organization is appearing before the commission, it should designate a representative to speak on behalf of the members. No comments should be made. Well, this is the piece that we actually amended. Anyone making out of order comments shall be subject to removal from the meeting. If a person is physically challenged or requires accommodation, the chair shall be advised. So if you want to open the hearing, I can go through the staff report for you.
Looks like we miss hearing at 6:31.
Thank you. So today's public hearing is going to go over 3 different ordinances to amend 3 different developmental titles. The first ordinance is C-1022, the second is C-1023, and the third is C-1024. C-1024, has actually changed since this presentation was created. Initially, the ordinance was going to amend Title 18, specifically the SEPA thresholds, changing those from what they currently are, upping them to the minimum standards allowed by the state. After discussions with agencies and local jurisdictions, we have opted to drop this request from this particular ordinance. So the proposed change to Title 18 is limited to 18.01 to 10, which is an amendment to the appeals section. So the only amendment being proposed tonight to Title 18 specifically has to do with amending the appeal section to be in conformance with the revisions to the appeal section currently being proposed in Title 14. I know it's a lot. If you have any questions, please feel free, but essentially we're adjusting the citation to make sure it makes sense when we change the other chapter.
So just to be clear, as staff, we're withdrawing from consideration of the planning commission changing the existing level of which a project has to go through an environmental review versus which it does not. So by default, it'll be the same levels as it is today. So we're just simply moving on with other amendments to 18 for consistency.
The second ordinance, which is ordinance C-1023, provides amendments to Title 16 subdivisions. There are a numerous amendments, but generally speaking, there's an establishment of a boundary line adjustment review process. There are amendments to the exemptions of the subdivision requirements. There are amendments to code citations, again, for consistency. There are amendments to definitions to provide additional consistency with the public works standards. There are amendments to the required application materials in this case. They're not significant things like instead of a title report, doing a subdivision guarantee, stuff like that. Amendments to the preliminary plat park land dedication requirements. This I actually want to read to you because this is the first time you're seeing this language. The majority of this we've gone through twice at this point. But in this case, for the park dedication requirements, the language reads, park dedication is required for any subdivision. Again, this is a requirement for preliminary long plats. So residential plats above 9 or 10 lots, sorry. Parkland dedication is required for any subdivision where 10 or more lots are created for a single family or medium density residential development as defined by the most recently adopted comprehensive plan. The dedication shall be a minimum of 5% of the land area prior to required dedication. So essentially that would be 5% before you cut roads into it and things like that, stormwater, that sort of thing. Dedication lands may not be used for other purposes such as stormwater control, storage, or other non-park uses. A park impact fee in lieu of land dedication may be considered consistent with the requirements of Airway Heights Municipal Code 16.09, which is the park land dedication code. Park impact fees in lieu of dedication must be reviewed and approved by the City of Airway Heights Park Board prior to the preliminary plat approval. So essentially it's requiring a park dedication, but if you want to do a park impact fee in lieu of that dedication, it has to first be approved by our park board. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. Oh, that was a mouthful. Okay. Amendments to the plat approval process. Again, that's going back to amendments to Title 14 Heather's going to talk about here momentarily. the establishment of a process for creating additional lots within a binding site plan. We spoke about those at a previous workshop. Amendments to the design standards and minimum improvement requirements for all subdivisions. This is to provide consistency with our most recently adopted public works standards, and amendments to the park impact mitigation fee review process, which allows the park impact fee to be set yearly in our fee ordinance as opposed to it being a static number. And Title 14, which is ordinance C-1022, Heather is going to speak on that.
Okay. Well, thank you. So this also has been workshopped twice. And so just as a recap, there were some changes that came through the legislature that updated the requirements for processing applications. We and all other growth management communities, which is about 11 counties out of the state of Washington, are required to meet certain timelines for development review. And those were updated as part of the 2023 legislative session. And those included how long we have to review projects that have SEPA, certain projects that have a public hearing, etc. And in some cases, the timeline was slightly increased from 60 to 65. Some project timelines were increased from 60, I believe, to 72, and others. We had a maximum timeline of 120 for all applications that had a public hearing, and that has been modified as well. We also wanted to work on consistency in our procedures. We found that when we looked across these codes that tied in things like subdivision or doing an environmental review on a project subject to zoning or building, that we had different notice requirements. We had different appeal processes, and we've talked about this before. In one particular case, we potentially may have issues of concern of whether or not we're exceeding the number of open record and closed record hearings that may be allowed on an application. That was the conditional use permit. And I know this is all brand new for you, but essentially, unlike other elements of local government, planning has these requirements, very specific requirements that are now statewide. So if you go from another jurisdiction to another jurisdiction, so if you try to do a project in the city of the Valley, or you do a project in Airway Heights, our project process will be nearly identical as it would be if you went to, let's say, Snohomish, because that's also a growth management community. And we have specific time periods we have to perform and complete decision-making. And that was because of issues with development being held up in application processing. So that also provided that we were limited to the number of hearings that we could have for a project when a hearing was required. And that included one closed record and one open record. So when a project comes before a city hearings examiner, that would be open record. Everybody gets to submit evidence into the record for that decision maker. It's the public, the applicant, as well as the local agency, in this case, the city. Once a decision is made, there is usually a further opportunity that the state provides to do what's called an administrative appeal. So in other words, you don't have to go to court to appeal it, but if the local agency decides it wants to, it can allow for a local appeal. And that local appeal, in some cases, can be to the city council. The state law says that the council can't do it as another open record. It's not, and everybody submits some information. They have to, the city council has to stick to the decision and any information that was already submitted when the record was open. No new information can be submitted, and this is critical for purposes of hearing an appeal, is this idea of the decision maker, whether they made the right decision based on what was provided at the time. So we've done quite a few changes in order to clarify what that open record process is, when a closed record hearing could occur, and we've identified the various routes of appeals associated with this code. So just as a recap for the Planning Commission, today, under our existing code, things like a preliminary long plat would go through the planning commission and go to the city council. We proposed that to go to the hearings examiners because that would be a single hearing. Whereas we're having two hearings with planning commission and city council. And that decision maker would be the final decision maker on a plat. A plat is 10 lots or more. Today, a conditional use permit goes to the hearings examiner. Those are things that are allowed in a zone based on a case-by-case analysis if it's appropriate for that location and the appropriate mitigation can be assigned to it. In our current code, there's a second opportunity for the city council to render a decision on this decision of the hearings examiner. And again, we get into that dilemma of how many open record hearings you have. And in technicality, that decision of the hearing examiner was the open record hearing. Today, rezones would be considered by the planning commission and the city council. The proposal is for rezones to stay with the planning commission and the city council. And the reason is because by separate state law, rezones, even though they have a public hearing, they're considered to be a legislative function and a responsibility of city councils. And planning commissions exist by state law to advise the city council on such land use matters. So things like rezones, comprehensive plan amendments, zoning text amendments, map amendments are all legislative. And so those would all continue to remain with the planning commission and the city council because they're not bound by this regulatory reform of limiting the number of public open record public hearings that can occur on an application. So that means even if an individual were to make a text amendment, which we will workshop next, that would still go to the planning commission under this proposed code. And the planning commission would have a hearing and the city council would have a hearing taking testimony on that proposal. And so there was some confusion, I think, a little when I tried to explain this before about how many hearings can you have and whether the state law allows. So the answer is legislative functions aren't going to limit the number of hearings by state law. There are very specific provisions, including the planning commission and city council in those decisions. Others are more discretionary and they're subject to decision criteria. They're not legislative in nature. And so therefore, we've proposed some amendments to be consistent with the number of hearings and streamline that process for applications. Did I do a better job this time?
Makes sense to me.
Okay. Let's see. We also included some elements of some other chapters in the code. And I just want to be clarify this because I think there was a misunderstanding in the packet. We're replacing chapter 14.01 with a new chapter 1401 that starts on page 104 of your packet. We are proposing to repeal, which means it would be deleted. And that's why there's strike through on 1402, 1403, 1404, 1405, and 1406. We are not proposing to remove 1407, 1408, 1409, 1410, and 1411. So the difference is that 07, 08, 09, 10, 11 talk about establishing a hearings examiner. Yes, we want to keep 1408 and have the hearings examiner. It talks to transportation, impact fees, and a couple of other chapters. So we are keeping those. We are not recommending they be deleted. As we work through the hearing, we'll help you craft an updated resolution reflecting that. We're only replacing those chapters of 1402 through 1406 that were being consolidated now into a single 1401 rather than having to jump between 6 chapters of the code to figure out what you were supposed to do. Did I mention Zach and I have only been here for 4 years? And I think this was adopted in 2008 originally. We also added,
Pause real quick.
yeah.
Longer than 4 years now, right?
Nope,
It started before COVID. And
Like-
COVID started 2020,
yep.
so we're on 5 years now, right? Semantics here, but.
So So Zach began in February of 2020. I began in the end of November of 2019. And this is March of
Be 4 years. Yeah.
2024.
Stand corrected.
Challenging my math, and I didn't make a cup of coffee for myself. It's okay. Time flies when you're having a good time, right? Yeah. But the point is that the code was very outdated. It was spread out over a variety of chapters, and we've gone into a lot of detail, but this is mostly just to kind of remind you of the things that we did. We moved, for example, the decision criteria for some of the applications into the same chapter. We added some expirations to some of the approvals, so it was really strange that we had decisions like a conditional use permit, but we didn't talk about under what conditions that approval could expire. And the same thing for variances. And we also moved some sections having to do with the overall hearing process. Remember, I talked about the legislative ones. We just put it all in one chapter so someone wouldn't have to look around to find out how to do a rezone. Because when an applicant's looking for a process, they just want to know how to do it. Like they don't care, whether it's separated because it's a legislative function. And we also added some tools here to make it easier for the reader to find information. So clarifying when we want to have a pre-application review of a project, where to find and what applications have an official determination of a complete application, because that relates to Washington State vesting of an application, which ones have to do a notice of application under the state law, those that have to do a notice of public hearing, and certainly clarifying when a final decision has to be made and who makes that final decision. So that's all been spelled out in these chapters as we move forward. So I'm going to pause there for a moment. Were there any clarifying questions on the sections that we were looking to update in Title 14? Go ahead. One final element, it was the notice. We found that we had a variety of notices, and we had types of notices that we were concerned were not really being effective. And so we've streamlined that into just a set of notice that's consistent across the code. And so one of the things we're eliminating is putting a posting over at Yokes. Zach's been over there a couple of times. Well, my point is Zach posts every one of the applications, but when he's gone to return, he's found the official posting board cleared off. We have posted here at City Hall, but we're concerned that nobody, sees that. And so we're relying on more formal methods people are more familiar with, like mailing within 300 feet of a project site to notify people that there's an application, or a sign on the property where it's appropriate, because people see signs in order to address notification. So that's the body of work in a nutshell. So I've clarified we're only deleting some of the chapters. We're replacing 1401. We probably have a few elements that we can answer questions for if you have deeper questions, but that's the presentation.
I don't have any deeper questions. Our workshops that have gone over this pretty thoroughly, and you did a good recap of that today.
Oh, we got more.
Nice.
I know that I read most of it. I read most of what you sent me, a lot of pages, but it was comprehensive to me. So we felt that pretty good.
Okay.
Well, we'll go through the rest of the presentation here. The rest of the presentation is kind of compressed more into, we've been processing these kind of as a big packet together. So most of it's kind of compressed that way. When we talk about the comprehensive plan, it breaks down to individual titles, but you'll see what I'm talking about. So in this case, the public participation process for all three of these started with the workshops. Again, that was on December 13th and January 10th. We are required to provide a 60-day notice to the Department of Commerce when we make changes to our development code. That was provided on February 26th. We did do mailings and postings of our SEPA determination and public hearing for tonight, and that was done on February 27th. Tonight is the public hearing. if the planning commission recommends these approvals to city council, they do have to go to a study session followed by 2 separate legislative sessions. Ordinances require 2 separate readings. So there's a first reading and then a second reading, and then that final public hearing prior to adoption. So right now we're shooting for May 24th on that. So there's still some work to be done once we get through this. The State Environmental Policy Act determination, so this is SEPA. I think we're all pretty familiar with that at this point, but SEPA is a requirement for any developmental code change. It's essentially requests that staff review for environmental impacts. Potentially in this case, since it doesn't actually propose any actual action. They were issued determinations of non-significance. All of them were issued on February 27th. We did get comments on our amendments to Title 18 from DOT, the city of Spokane, and from DNR. All of those had to do with the SEPA thresholds that are no longer being considered. So I'm not going to go over those in detail just because they're no longer, they don't matter because we're making that change anymore. But we did not receive any comments on our changes to Title 16, nor did we receive any comments on our proposed changes to Title 14. When we do make changes to the developmental code, the planning commission is required to consider certain items. They're found under Airway Heights Municipal Code 1405030. The first item is whether or not the development is consistent with the comprehensive plan and meets the requirements and intents of the developmental code. So this is where these are going to be broken down individually. And this one, again, it's outdated. It speaks to the SEPA exemptions. And in this case, since we're no longer proposing SEPA exemptions, we're just doing a cleanup on a reference essentially for our appeals section. It is still consistent with goal 12. You'll see that one on all of these because goal 12 is essentially involved the community of Airway Heights and all local government and decision making, which is why we're here today to that. So we're doing that. But again, these 2 items are more specific to the actual change in SEPA threshold. So they no longer are really prevalent. For Title 16, there are 3 goals. Again, goal 12 still here. It's going to be also on Title 14. So spoiler alert. The other 2, goal 7, which is planned for and established types and quantities of land uses in Airway Heights that support community need and promote service efficiency and fiscal sustainability. The changes to the subdivision process, they're designed to provide clarity, specifically looking at things like adding a process for boundary line adjustments. That's something that comes up all the time. So now that we have it codified, we can point to that. They have a process they can hold on to. So it just helps us with that. Same thing with adding lots in a binding site plan. That's something that's come up a couple separate times. So the purpose is to provide clarity, increase service efficiency through expediting the permitting process for Title 16. Goal 9, which is maintain and improve Airway Heights parks and recreational opportunities, sustaining an attractive, safe, and functional system for all and every home located within the service area of park. This is specific to that parkland dedication requirement that we added to this section. Okay, sorry. Sounds like there's a miscommunication over there. So in this case, the proposed amendment to the park dedication requirements for Long Class, they're intended to provide additional parklands to be obtained as the city develops, which should help maintain the level of service standards for parklands within the city and provide for additional park resources for residential areas. So this is something, if you think back to Sunset at Hunter's Crossing, most of you were here for that. That was something where we had a little sandpaper with, but now that we have it as a requirement moving forward, we should be able to get additional parkland to support our expansion within our residential areas. Title 14, again, goal 12 here, but we're here. Goal 2, maintain and improve the provisions of high quality, affordable, and efficient community services in Airway Heights. Again, the amendments to Title 14 are designed to provide clarity and increase service efficiency through expediting the permitting process. It just all the things Heather just talked about, including the signage, stuff like that. It just makes things easier, not forcing them to go to the spokesman review and spend $500 to post stuff, stuff like that. In goal 7, provide for and establish types and quantities of land uses and airway heights that support community needs and promote service efficiency. And it's kind of the same thing, just provide clarity and increase service efficiency through expediting the permit process. Everything's designed to make life easier for everyone involved in this chapter. The second item you review for, and in these last items, they're going to be combined. They're not going to be broken down because most of them don't really apply here. The development makes adequate provisions for open space, drainage ways, streets, and other public ways. Again, they don't provide any open space, drainage ways, streets, or other public ways because the actual items are code changes. They're not an actual development. The third is the development adequately mitigates environmental impacts. That's where the SEPA process comes in. We did issue those determination of non-significances on February 27th. And the issues were kind of self-mitigated by removing the SEPA threshold issue. So that's no longer an issue. The fourth item is that the development is not harmful to the public health, safety, and welfare. They don't include any development. Through the comprehensive plan, they were found to be consistent and should therefore be considered within the public interest of the citizens of Airway Heights. The comprehensive plan is our guiding plan, our guiding policy. If they're consistent with that, then they should be consistent with this. And here's the super long one. Essentially, does it lower the level of service for neighborhood facilities? And how does it mitigate that? Again, it's not an actual development. They're not expanding its potential uses, shouldn't have any impact on the transportation network. And it should also not have any impact on the neighborhood park facilities beyond potential expansion, which we're all looking forward to. And I believe this is the last one, right? Yes, this is the last one. The area location and features of the land proposed for dedication are a direct result of the development proposal, reasonably needed to mitigate the effects. There's no land dedications associated with the adoption of these code changes. So with that, staff is recommending that you move to approve 3 separate resolutions here. So it would be 3 different motions for PC 2024 005 through 007. And again, this would just be to forward the recommended changes to each title for title 18, 16, and 14. And then if there are any additional questions, myself and Heather are available.
Thank you, Zach. Thank you, Heather, for that. I feel like we're gonna open this up to commissioner discussion right now. To me, this was covered in our previous meetings very well. I know Pleasant, you weren't here for those ones. So if there's any questions you can bring to me, this is pretty standard and straightforward, though, based on everything that we talked about, just clarifying it and making these the standards of the state and then easier to read too as well. I don't know how the rest of you all feel.
I agree.
Good. Straightforward, yeah.
Justin, Brenda,
Ms. John.
No, I agree.
Agreed.
all right, with that said, will somebody make a motion on, do we have to have them as 3 separate motions or can we do it as one?
They're 3 separate because there are 3 separate ordinances, so they'll need 3 separate. It's a numbering thing, but yes, separate.
If somebody can make a motion on the PC 24005.
Okay. Move to approve and adopt resolution PC 2024-007. It go beyond that.
No, that's okay.
Doesn't second that. All those in favor?
Aye.
The ayes have it.
Be moved to approve and adopt resolution PC 2024-006.
Sure.
Mhm.
All those in favor?
Aye.
The ayes have it.
I move that we approve and adopt resolution PC 2024-005.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it.
Mhm.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah.
Look forward to bringing us into code and making that language a little bit better going forward.
Well, thank you very much for your patience as we work through not very fun, exciting changes to the code.
It really did, well,
Still get to learn about them though, so that's the
Yeah.
nice part.
yeah, it's easy to understand, well, for all that.
Thank you. We'll move these forward as ordinances to the city council and make sure complete our as to form review by the legal department. And this will be completed probably in the next 60 days. There is one more piece of this that'll eventually be coming probably toward the end of this year or next year. And that is part of that same bill that created the date changes and so forth. Also requires us to do mandatory reporting on how long and whether or not we're achieving these new application processing timelines.
Nice.
And we have to make it on a publicly accessible web platform.
Nice. To not like draw this conversation out, but tying to our conversation earlier, how does this affect grants?
So this is not directly related to growth management. And under growth management, our next periodic update will be due by June 30th of 2026. So these dates that we just adopted now had to be adopted by next year. So check the box. We got that done.
Yes.
We're not ready to do the next piece of this, which is the reporting on the application processing. And part of that is because this legislature directed the Department of Commerce, which administers all of these programs and provides technical guidance, was supposed to provide technical guidance and grant funding to enable us to do this. And so that's one of the things that Department of Commerce is working on right now this spring. It's trying to launch the technical assistance and the grant program that we have intentions of applying to help fund expansions of our online permit system and do an interface to our website so that we are able to provide that mandatory reporting by the timeline
Okay.
in the legislation.
Just know every time that we're trying to meet a state standard, it does affect the money that's coming into the city. So it's always nice when we do that.
Then the extra fun that's been happening is that these requirements apply and you can apply for the grant to do it, or you can do it at your own expense. And that's one of the reasons why we've been so busy writing grants under planning, and we will be applying for this grant funding for the permit system, but it's why we applied for the $500,000 of climate action money, because otherwise we're required to do that as part of the 2026 update without any funding assistance. And it's why we applied for the $50,000 for the missing middle housing project, which is kicking off because we're still required to do it.
Nice. It's smart thinking.
Well, yes, I agree, but remarkably, there are communities that don't have the capacity to apply for the grants because they just don't have the capacity to put together grant applications.
Fortunate.
It is unfortunate, and I just heard last week when we were meeting with Department of Commerce that they couldn't guarantee that the climate action money would be available.
Oh, yeah.
And so we took a risk being a community of 11,000 people. The only other communities that applied were Liberty Lake, which is about 12,000 people. The Spokane County, the city of Spokane, we all threw in, went in uncharted territory and applied for that $500,000, which we received. And we heard last week that that money's going to go away for those people who didn't apply for it if the state legislature doesn't renew the Climate Commitment Act.
Well, they're talking about repealing it. I mean,
Yeah.
It's scary stuff. So
Yeah, so timing is everything when it comes to grant money. So that could leave the rest of the communities here in Spokane County that chose to wait to apply. They may not have access to that funding.
Thank you. So let's move on to our workshop tonight.
Yeah, so this is some proposed amendments to Airway Heights Municipal Code 17.16.110. I'm gonna swap screens here because I like to make things complicated.
So workshops are introducing the item. It's not the intent to debate the merits of the application that's been presented. It's to identify if there are questions that you'd like to be brought forth as part of a staff report, additional information that may be helpful to the hearing for the planning commission. It's just to introduce it to the commission members and talk about the hearing process around the application. The merits of the application are discussed after you receive a presentation by the applicant, the staff, and you hear public testimony at the hearing, which will occur next month.
Do we need to close the public hearing or did the vote on the resolution close it?
Technically, closing the hearing, yes, before the vote, but
Can you
I apologize.
retroactively close it at 6:59? Since we took the vote at 7.
you could do that.
Right, we'll retroactively close the public hearing at 6:59. I apologize for that. So
Oh, no, you're fine. Shit, caught that. Sorry. Okay, so I'm gonna kind of go over a little bit of why this is important, the history of it, before we get into the actual proposal. So as everyone sitting here and on Zoom knows, the city of Airway Heights lies adjacent to Fairchild Air Force Base. Fairchild Air Force Base has a significant impact on the land use planning within the city of Airway Heights. It's just the nature of the beast. One of the most impactful overlay zones we have pertaining to Fairchild is called the Accident Potential Zone. And there are two separate sections. So the APZ2 and the APZ1. You can kind of see there's only a small section of the city within the APZ1. So between Craig and McFarland, they're on the corner. But if we zoom out a little bit, and by a little bit, apparently, I mean a lot. Sorry, my controls are behind my Zoom stuff. You can kind of see how the APZs are formed, right? They're an extension of the Fairchild runway. So as the planes come in and they land, the possibility of an accident happening goes up. So the purpose of the APZs is to limit uses that may be incompatible. It's much better to have an empty warehouse where a plane crashes than Walmart is a good example. We don't want people living down there, so they're sleeping, bad things happen, stuff like that. So we meaning the city of Airway Heights, take protection of Fairchild Air Force Base very, very seriously. We have an entire section, Municipal Code 17.16. It's our JLIS standards designed to protect Fairchild. One of the items that is currently limited for placement within the APZ2 is overhead transmission lines. So think power lines, big, tall, over the head stuff. Avista is working on doing a new transmission line that would run through Southern Airway Heights. They have considered multiple different options on routing. The quickest and easiest and less or least cost route is through the APZ. I think this initially came to us maybe a year and a half ago, maybe more at this point. And representatives from Avista have been in contact with Fairchild Air Force Base in discussions about the potential to do this. The base commander at Fairchild Air Force Base at this time has decided based on the most recent federally adopted ACUS standards. God, so many things here I'm going over. I'm so sorry.
I'm gonna break down the acronyms.
ACUS is Air Installation Compatibility Use Zone. Holy cow.
Junk.
Right? Like out of nowhere. But essentially it's a federal program that provides general standards for all Air Force bases throughout the country to use for land use compatibility with local jurisdictions. But local jurisdictions adopt their own version of that. So there's a federal, there's us. We have different standards in the county and the city, blah, blah, blah. So in this case, the base commander at Fairchild and the community planner at Fairchild have determined that overhead transmission lines are now compatible with the APZ2. and they are allowed to be in there. We have a letter, sorry.
I was gonna say, just to be clear, so the APZ accident potential zone, the 1 is higher potential, right, than the 2. So 2 is the less
Correct.
likely to.
So there's more restrictions within 1 than 2.
Right, because the planes are taking off.
That too, yes. I'm sorry.
And so the closer to the runway on the west side, the
Yeah.
lower the plane is
Right.
in
Right. And I think
relationship.
CZ is crash zone.
Correct, yeah,
That's-
crash zone. Yeah, so the closer you get to the runway,
Right.
the more restrictive it's gonna be.
So- Sorry, I just, they're taking off and landing opposite depending on wind and stuff, right? They're not always landing and taking off at the same end, right? Okay, okay.
But this end is in the city.
Okay, no, I was, sorry, just wanted to clarify because of what you just said, Heather, and I just wanted to make sure that I was correct on that.
Yeah, so you're right. It's I should have described it as a vertical or an incline compared to the horizontal, and this is actually a geometric
Mhm.
area.
It's a cone.
Defined by the distance from the end of the airstrip and the relative height from the ground is what generates it. So for purposes of what we're working with, everything in the APZ2 is treated the same. So it doesn't gradually get easier to do an activity in APZ2. It's
Right.
everything is treated the same.
So, so again, we got, sorry, I'm trying to get back to where we were here. So the base commander made a recommendation that, the city amend their standards for JLIS to allow for overhead transmission lines within the APZ2, not the APZ1. And I'll get to that snafu in a second here. So again, this is something Avis has been working on. We did get an application. Our strong recommendation was that the application come with a signed letter from the base commander, recommending approval. So we have that now. So we do have the amendments to the code. So this is 17.16, this is 110. So this is a use matrix, right? You can see it's broken down. It does have clear zone on here. Clear zone is actually not within city limits, but APZ1 and APZ2 are here. And it's really simple. Single use, single units. These are residential. No, you can't do any of that. And then it goes into manufacturing and goes into all these separate land use categories. And it allows us, this is literally what we use when someone calls and says, hey, can I build an amusement park, on this parcel down here? And I will, well, according to Slocum Code 45, the answer is no. But in this case, it's Slocum Code 48, which is utilities. Sorry, Justin's popping in and out. I think he's working. So in this case, utilities, and there are some little numbers here. It's hard to see. But what you're looking at, so again, APZ1 and APZ2, the two different things are going to matter here. So there's a little 6 here. It says, yes, utilities are allowed within both APZs. So if you go down to note 6, note 6 says no above ground passenger terminals and no above ground power transmission or distribution lines. So exactly what Avista wants to do is actually not allowed through note 6. Prohibited power lines include high voltage transmission, blah, blah. So the note 6 currently applies to both the APZ and the APZ2. So both APZ and APZ2 have a 6. Where to go? 48, right? Yeah. So currently it has a 6. What we're proposing is a sub note 6A, which would state no above ground passenger terminals, high voltage above transmission lines and distribution lines powered to the city. Sorry. High voltage above ground transmission lines and distribution lines that provide power to cities, towns, or regional power for unincorporated areas require a conditional use permit. So what we would be doing is taking only within the APZ2. So that's why it's 6A and not 6. That was the mistake I made, was that I just amended 6 and then Fairchild very nicely let me know that that would apply to the APZ1. We cleaned it up real quick. But what we're offering again to the APZ2 to allow those transmission lines that is supported by Fairchild's base commander, but it would require a conditional use permit. And we did talk a little bit about conditional use permits, but generally speaking, they provide for a deeper level of review. They require hearing examiner approval, and they allow additional mitigations beyond standard mitigations that apply in our code. So for a conditional use permit, they can say, hey, we're going to put it here and there. But if there's a specific part or something that doesn't work, or if we need extra landscaping, or if we need to cut it out of the,
Can you go to the conditional use section for J-list?
oh boy. Yeah, give me just a second here.
So there's embedded into J-list, which stands for Jointly Land Use Standards. It authorizes a hearings examiner through that conditional use permit and consultation with Fairchild to apply additional conditions to a project. And so we just want to show you the language just shows that there could be additional consideration.
Yeah.
So it can include buffers, where buildings go, limitations on vegetation, utilities, structural design, height, location, glare, etc. And what we understood was that Avista is proposing new transmission facilities. So there's more power, right? It's not a distribution system, it's a transmission system, but that their poles would be under 100 feet. And so that's part of why Fairchild Air Force Base, it feels a text amendment in this particular case could be appropriate to allow for that conditional use permit. That would be different if Bonneville Power Administration were to also want to do a conditional use permit, but they would be proposing, 120-foot tall lines. In that case, Fairchild may not find that BPA power lines going through the APZ would be appropriate. So that's kind of a distinction that a conditional use permit would allow is for a review of the various factors of the specific application for purposes of safety and operation of Fairchild.
And just for my own curiosity's sake, is the height of the newly intended transmission lines, is that the issue? Because there are already power lines on Craig. I'm pretty sure there's power lines on McFarland and
It has to do with that their transmission. They're high powered, so they're
okay,
yes.
so it's not just
It's infrastructure network. So the background project to this is that they're bringing more power through this transmission system from Craig Road South that's going to power a new substation and then be distributed from that substation. That substation will be located on South Craig Road. And that is something Avista is doing in preparation for the power demand here on the West Plain. So it's not a distribution system, which is what you see going down the road.
okay. So there's okay. So that's it. Okay.
Distribution
Good.
or,
I'm glad
they're
cleared that up.
25 feet tall poles or 20-foot tall poles, and they're carrying a line from one end of Campbell to the other, right?
Right.
And then it splits off from there. This is a transmission system, bringing high voltage and multiple lines to a new power station. So you've seen the new power station over on Flint Road and US 2 on the north side.
Mhm.
That's what's being built on South Craig Road. And you've seen, and if you haven't been by, you might want to drive by and see an example of the lines coming into that, because the lines that are next to the Circle K,
Yeah.
those are transmission.
Sure, those poles are taller than 100 foot too. I think maybe. They're big. Yeah.
Yeah.
So is that the site? Is that the site where they put it off the old guy's mobile home right by Thorpe and Craig? For a while there was Inland Power had signs on it parcel. They cleared all the stuff off.
They
I
are
think the
doing,
old
Avista
gentleman-
is doing it for Inland Power, yes.
Yeah.
Avista and Inland Power have a co-locate agreement, and then Avista also does apparently work like this for Inland. And it's my understanding that'll be part of this system is Inland Power as well.
So another not intended, but added bonus of this is this allows for the routing of those lines to avoid the downtown area and Airway Heights. So that's something where they were looking at routing and it may have cut through there, and this, doing it this way completely eliminates that. So it's not something we're considering, but it's a bonus. Are there any questions on this? The next step for this would be a public hearing at the Planning Commission next month.
Well, this seems really
It
straightforward.
really is. It can't get much
Makes
worse.
sense, yeah.
So what we'll do is, you'll get the packet, of course, next month with the applicant's materials in it. There will be a staff report evaluating independently the proposal and the comments that we received to date, which includes, of course, the letter of support from Fairchild Air Force Base. And we will also forward you the hearing procedure. So very similar to tonight, it will be a public hearing. Difference will be that there will be a process by which there's a presentation by staff, followed by an applicant presenting, which in this case will be a Vista. There, I imagine we could end up with someone from Fairchild attending as well. And then public testimony. And then you would close public testimony, and then you would engage in debate and discussion amongst the commission members about whether to recommend approval, recommend modification, or recommend denial. Those are the three options a commission has around a hearing item. Regardless of what your recommendation is, it always goes to the city council because you're an advisory body. So you could, so an example would be approval as written. Modification would be, hey, I think you should add some conditions to the conditional use criteria, or I think you should add another kind of use to this footnote 6. Let's say we think transmission lines and solar farms should all be allowed in this. So that's a modification. Planning Commission technically on text amendments, the Planning Commission can modify and they can expand within limits the scope of a proposal, and then you can also recommend denial as well.
Those are choices you could do. Just, yeah.
You do have the power. It's a mighty power.
All right.
Look forward to this next month.
You have to admit, we make it fun, right? Like planning can be so boring.
I enjoy my time here.
It's good.
You know,
Yeah.
5 years.
I've learned a lot being part of this.
Yeah.
So does anyone want to take a real quick break before we go into the training? Yeah, I would like to use the restroom.
Yep. There's two. There's one right behind the door, and if you go through this doorway, there's a separated men's and women's restroom.
The video is about 18 minutes long, just so everybody knows what that looks like.
Yeah, I would still like to.
I wasn't trying to screw you up there.
I should get extra credit or a pass because I did that course you sent out. You recommended us we do that thing with the state. I did that. That included this session. Didn't it?
Well, if we get you to sign the certificate,
I meant to ask about that shit because it's like.
All right. So the last thing on the list today. We do have a presentation. It's going to be a short video on the Open Public Meeting Act. I'm going to go ahead and play it.
So quick. Item. The, as an advisory body, the planning commission cannot have a closed meeting. That is not open to the public.
What if you're like in a joint thing with city council? Can they close it then in the beginning?
The city council can only close a meeting, call what's called an executive session under very specific reasons. For example, to discuss a real estate action in which discussion of the property would affect the price. A matter of personnel, which cannot be disclosed to the public. They can do, I believe, certain emergency situations, discussions in a closed session. So none of those would likely apply to any advisory body. Thanks.
Lawsuits.
Lawsuits.
Litigation, yeah.
Litigation.
Pending litigation.
I think it's the right word.
I have a question. So let's say this event that's coming up on the 25th.
Mhm.
We all go there, we're there, and we are discussing something that we're actively working on. Are we now in violation of that?
So that's why our advice has been, you gather and you talk about dogs.
Like where, because going to this event is about Airway Heights and it is.
So let's refine a little bit more. So there isn't any action required of the planning commission related to going to that open house. Um, so, I mean, you can talk about the merits, you can talk about your own experiences with regards to what people have told you about their concerns about that project. But you can't formulate a proposed action, like, let's bring this to the planning commission and we're gonna do X with it. Or let's say that there was something related to it, like money. You couldn't talk about money if you knew that there was going to be a discussion about funding for that project at an open house. But you can go, but you also can't talk about any other business. You can't go to that meeting and have a quorum of the planning commission talking about this text amendment.
Mhm.
You know, so you just can't be together talking as a quorum of the planning commission about any business that is before the commission or could come before the commission. But you can absolutely attend an open house and talk about the merits of the project. Hey, this is fun, this is great. I hope you get more people from X coming and talking about this. Has anybody brought up, this intersection as a safety concern? You can do that.
What if there's a quorum present, but not a quorum in the conversation?
So splitting hairs. So the goal is, and we've talked about this before about, is there an impression by a member of the public that someone is talking about the business of the planning commission at a meeting while you're gathered? And because they overheard talking about the Vista application, coming up, right? That creates an impression that there is business occurring. So ideally, we would recommend that you do not talk about a matter of business before the commission. If you all get together and you talk about dogs. Just kidding. You can talk about ice cream.
Fair enough.
Unless the ice cream pertains to a project that we're. planning commission.
That is really good.
So we've talked about, we'll get to another part, which is called the appearance of fairness.
Okay.
That's
that's-
next month.
And that has to do with, coming in as a volunteer and you're open and considering what's presented to you and how the things that you do can create a sense that it's a bias and unfair consideration. And there's real and there's perceived. So we could talk more about that too. Did that answer the question?
Yes, it did. Thank you.
When is that?
I see what you're doing and I don't like it.
And that's why it's so important that Zach is posting. It's just a week ahead of time.
Questions, discussion? You both are like looking eagerly. I just, I want to go back to this. Are we allowed to discuss anything that is going on before us? Even if we're not making decisions, let's just use this Vista thing, for example, right? We go to this open house on the 25th, there's a quorum there, and a Vista person happens to be there. And the conversation just goes, hey, I got something coming up before you guys in the coming months, and starts talking about it. Are we supposed to just not talk, period, about that at that point?
Yeah, you would say, we're gonna be hearing this matter, and this is crossing over more into the appearance of fairness part, which we'll do next month, then the open public meetings, and it has to do with contact, having to do with a proposal in which the planning commission is being asked to render a recommendation. But let's take another example, because I see where you're going. So you're at the workshop on the 25th, and we're going to be talking about missing middle in the future. You're eventually going to be making a decision, a recommendation about that. So in that case, if you had a quorum together and you decided to start chatting about whether you like townhomes or not, I don't see that as an issue. I think there's a broad range of things you could actually discuss, but I'd recommend, for purposes of appearance, that you wouldn't do anything specific having to do with any legislation that's going to be coming to you. So, talking about whether or not you're going to advocate or actively try to ban sixplexes from being part of the missing middle consideration. Does that make sense? Because that's one of the options that you have. But you can say, hey, getting together, there's a quorum. Like, I love the planning commission. This is awesome. Another 4 more years. You can talk about this stuff.
And I'm just asking hypotheticals because this is how my brain thinks when it comes to this type of stuff. We have seven member body, right? So let's just say we know that we have 2 people leaving in a 2-month period. They haven't been filled. Would you now need 3 people for a quorum, or is this still a 4-person quorum?
Your quorum's based on the actual numbers appointed. So vacant seats don't count against you, I guess, for purposes of a quorum. So if you have 7 members, then your quorum is 4. If you have 6 seated commission members, your quorum is 3.
Okay, so we need 4 right now, right? Because we have 7 members on this commission. We're sitting in a meeting, or we're sitting at this open house. There's just 3 of us. We're okay to talk to the Avista person and have a conversation about what's coming up. It doesn't.
No, because that's wandering into the area of appearance of fairness,
Okay.
in which you're debating or you're entertaining information about a project that's coming before you for a recommendation, and you're already aware that it's a project coming before you for a recommendation. And so are you engaging in the merits of a project outside of a public hearing, outside of the ability of the public to hear that? And, let's say that there's an opponent to that project. The appearance of fairness has to do with your conduct, and there's 2 sides to this. So we're bringing up one in which potentially you're creating a bias toward those who are participating in this conversation with the Vista by talking to them about the project outside of the hearing. The other type of violation of appearance of fairness would be that Don is on the board of the Vista. So he has a clear potential issue of appearance of fairness because the organization that he contributes to, he volunteers or he's paid, has a material gained by the text amendment. In that case, it would be violating the appearance of fairness for Dawn to continue to be on the commission during the meeting, or for Dawn to advocate to you as a commission member about the merits of the application coming before the commission next month. Because he's now creating an issue of how open and fair an individual or several people together are going to be able to be at that hearing.
So I can think of like a situation that happened in the past, right? When Cal was on this commission, we had to recuse ourselves from a decision being made.
Mhm.
We were also sitting with a body, I think, of 4 people at the time.
Mhm.
So quorum would be 2. Would him and I have been violating this to have a conversation outside, even though we had recused ourselves from the vote and all that stuff?
No, because you knew you were going to recuse yourself and you weren't participating in the hearing, and the discussion weren't coming to making a recommendation.
Okay.
You would not have, because you already knew you were going to be out of it. But the 2 of you coming to the other commission members and advocating for a position, that would have then required the members to go through a disclosure process, and the appearance of fairness will get into this more detail. There's a way that you can cleanse yourself, I guess, of fairness issues by disclosing what happened. So let's say you talked to Bill and you were advocating, hey, Bill, I think you need to really vote for this. So Bill says, hey, I had a conversation with Mark about this very topic that's coming here. I'm disclosing this as part of this hearing. I feel that I am able to still be an unbiased participant in this commission hearing and hear the testimony that's provided. Now, the next step is the rest of the commission members can say, great, Bill, I agree with you. I know you, I believe that you're going to be able to be unbiased. But Ms. Pleasance here could say, I think you've been irreparably impacted by that discussion, and I don't agree that you can continue to be unbiased. And she can ask the other remaining sitting commission members to remove Bill from the discussion. So there's an entire process around how to deal with appearance of fairness. And so I understand your question, but the best advice, and we give this advice to you guys every time: get together, have fun, talk about dogs. I mean, yeah, and I understand that. I mean, there could be a natural tendency to say, hey, you know, that last commission meeting, Jesus Christ, dude, everybody shut up. Like, you can do that, and that's okay.
I would rather ask questions than do something stupid in the
Yeah.
future. So, you know,
Yeah, agreed.
but I know just in the past, Cal and I would see each other all the time, just in our professional lives. Now we hardly ever talk about business because there just wasn't that much going on.
Mhm.
But I can see it coming up in the future, and I'd rather be smart about it.
Yeah, absolutely. There isn't any intent to prevent you from discussing with other people. The goal, though, is to prevent a quorum, a majority of the commission getting together and basically talking business and talking about something that's coming up on the agenda or something that the group will be discussing. That's the purpose of the Open Public Meeting Act, is to warn you that that's inappropriate. And it's the same reason why email communication is treated the same way. That's why we never email you anything saying, please respond back to us, because under the Open Public Meeting would be violating it. The guy just said, there's like, I can't think of a way where we can get around this issue where you should have had the public allowed to participate even in an email exchange.
How are they going to deal with like technology as it changes so that communications online can be open to everybody, right?
Well, so one of the things that we'll be talking about is that the Planning Commission will probably be getting city issued emails, because the emails we're sending you, by virtue of them being created by a public agency, are subject to public records disclosure. So one of the cleanest ways to separate your personal email from work as a volunteer is to give you a city issued email address, and then it's really clear where that boundary is. We're only communicating with you on that city issued email address, and when a public records request comes in, then those are gathered and they're handed over to whoever requests them. And Washington State has a very strict public records retention and disclosure law, and we are subject to hundreds of thousands of dollars of penalties if we're not timely in turning over those records. So we have to follow these rules, and then, by doing this through publicly issued email address, we are able to come back and if someone were to make a claim that there was a violation of OPMA, I want to see email exchanges between the planning commission on such and such date and such date. We could hand them over and say there was no discussion about the merits of this project prior to that meeting.
Okay.
That's how technology, where we're going with this, because otherwise, our emails to you right now are subject to public records disclosure, and we have an entity that retains all of those for the required period of time, which I think is 10 years.
So you're saying all the commissions and stuff like that are gonna start having their.
Yeah, the city council is already on a city email system, and so we just had that conversation at the department head level about making sure that the other boards and commissions get city issued email addresses as well.
Maybe that person.
Well, it's a tech group. But so when you ask that question about the future, that's how we'll be handling it.
I appreciate all the information. Sorry if I sound ignorant. I just wanna, like I said, I would rather ask than not know.
No, absolutely. And it's really appropriate because you own a business, I mean, everybody's involved in some way with the community. It could be volunteering or participating in other groups. And these trainings are being required of us from the Association of Washington Cities, which provides our insurance as the city of Airway Heights. And they're now making these trainings mandatory. So it's their way of making sure that through the organization that everyone's aware of these requirements. And so we'll be going through this series, and then some of these trainings are required to be done annually. So. And I'm sorry that Justin dropped off because he'll have to go do it again. And we have to have everybody do it within 90 days.
Oh, he can take one of mine. I did this last month in Park Board, so he can use one of my meetings.
Yeah, well, so that's part of it, and it's all about liability, and it, more importantly to me, it really has to do with being a civil servant, right? Like, you're there to serve the community, and these are ways to make sure that we're fair and open about the discussions.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I know we've had these conversations in the past about what we are allowed to talk about and not talk about outside of these public meetings. But I do know that for the business side, it gets a little bit like, I don't know if I should be talking about that or not. So having that clarity will be nice.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I would encourage you, in the case of going to an event, that you should go and you should meet. And then I'll give you a real example that could happen, because Bill came to the last one in February. There will be a bunch of businesses that are going to be attending this next open house. As a business owner, they can talk to you about their perception about the project. You're okay with that. This is not a project that's coming before the commission for any recommendation or a decision.
Okay.
You can bring that information back. Bill says, I heard from Billy's Diner, and they're concerned about parking. Great, bring it back. Talk to us about it.
Nice. I look forward to the open house. Questions coming from anybody else? Nope, we'll adjourn this meeting at 8:08 on March 13th. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.
Thank you.
So who won?
Good night.